Okay, so in recent weeks we've done an awful lot of work to this neck and we're almost at a point where it's getting towards completion. There are a couple of really big jobs that need doing to it. We need to fit the frets and we need to put the carve on. But other than that, we're pretty much there with it. But before I do those two final jobs, there is actually one thing that I would like to do so that I can kind of be working on two fronts at once. And that is to finally get the body and the neck joined together into one unit. And to do that, we're going to have to cut a neck pocket. And in turn, for that to happen, we're going to need a neck pocket template. So that's what we're going to be doing in the first part of this video. And then we can be cutting that pocket out and getting this neck positioned. And to do this template, I'm going to use a technique that I've used any number of times before on this channel, but it's probably worth repeating because it will give me an absolutely custom, perfect fit neck template. But to do it, I'm going to need some materials and I'm also going to have to do a little bit of setting out. And the first bit of material I've got is just this sheet of MDF. Nothing special about it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fasten my neck in position and match the centre line of the neck onto this line I've drawn onto here, something like that. Then I've got another piece of board and this is going to be my actual template. It's 1/4 inch MDF, so 6mm. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of match up my centre lines. I'm going to ascertain exactly how deep I want to go into my template. I'll mark around that and then I'm going to cut it roughly on the bandsaw, but ever so slightly oversized. Then with that cut and my neck in position, I'm then going to fasten this down onto the main board, again super glue and masking tape with the centre lines matching up, and then the gap that I'm going to leave around this heel I'm actually going to fill with car body filler, Bondo for want of a better word. And what that will do is it will give me an absolutely spot on perfect fit for my template. And I've set this up so that my template is around about the 14th fret. I actually want my body neck joint to be around the 15th fret. So that is leaving me kind of just a little bit of extra template to help register my router and make my life a little bit easier. So that's the shape I want to cut out, but I actually want to come just a little bit more. So I'm going to come about 3mm either side. I'm going to cut out extra. So about there. However, there is a complication with this neck because we've got this little truss rod adjuster sticking out at the end, and I don't want to be fouling that with the filler that I'm going to use. So I'm actually going to leave the central section of this just the wood. And I think I can do that quite safely, and I'm going to go from about there and just kind of extend that out a little bit. And what that means is that the important bit, which is these sides and these corners, will be cast and they will be kind of a perfect fit to the neck, while this bit here that doesn't really matter as much because it's quite a simple shape will just be cut from the MDF, and that will butt up to the end of the neck when we make the template. So we'll get this to the bandsaw very quickly, cut it out, and we can get everything set up. And with that done, we can then start kind of getting this set up properly. Now, the last thing I want to be doing is sticking everything together with this filler that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to use some of this packaging tape. It's a bit of a release agent. some of that down. And then I'm also going to just wrap the end of the neck with it so that we're not going to get anything onto that. Once I get this all positioned, I'm actually then going to kind of use quite a lot of masking tape just to make sure that everything's covered up and we're not kind of making a mess of everything. So that's the first bit done, and then let's see, that fits pretty nicely. I'm just line that up. I'm just going to mark it so I know where to go. Now you can see this is all set up. We've just got a little bit of a gap around there that we need to fill. So I've got some of this Bondo. Just going to quickly mix that up and start to get it in. Now you might be asking why I'm going to all this trouble to make a kind of a one-off template when I could make some more permanent ones. And the answer is quite simple, is that I didn't make this neck off a template. So it's kind of a one-off, and we need a one-off template to match that. That's all nicely mixed up, and just start off squeezing a bit of that in there as best I can. So that's all nicely filled up now. This will probably go off in about 10 minutes, but I'm going to leave it for probably 24 hours-ish to fully harden, because there will be some shrinkage in this material. But what happens if I was to take this out while it was still kind of green, the shrinkage would happen dimensionally and the cutout would be bigger than I want it to be. If I leave this with the neck in situ for 24 hours, so it's fully cured when I take it out, all the shrinking will have taken place kind of within the material, so it will have shrunk down rather than in, if that makes sense. And that means I'll have a perfectly sized neck pocket template. All right, see you in 24 hours. And I've left this overnight, so all of this filler is very nicely cured now, and I think there's no risk of it shrinking or moving any further. So I'm going to start kind of dismantling all of this. I'll try and get as much of this tape off as I can first. It's going to be difficult because where the filler's dried on it, it makes it difficult to get off, but we'll do what we can. And then I'm going to kind of pull this off now, and I fully expect the template to come up with the neck. No, I think I think that's the best way of doing it. And apart from a little bit of residue from the tape, that's all kind of come off okay, so we haven't kind of done any damage or anything to the neck by doing this, which is brilliant. We did lose a little bit of the filler from up this end, but I think that's going to be kind of beyond where we need it, so it's not a problem. So the next job is we need to clean up the top surface of this, and there is a little bit that's kind of gone through, so we just need to clean that up as well to get it back to the shape that we want. And then I've got a really rough 60 grit pad on this block. I'm just going to start rubbing this down. So there we have the finished template, and as you can see, it's absolutely spot on. There's no gap whatsoever around it. So I'm very confident we'll get a very nice tight fitting neck joint. So next up is we need to get this off the bench, set up the body and start to work out exactly where we need to put this template. And getting this set up probably isn't as complicated as you might think it is. I've reinstated the centre line along my top. I've done that because the actual glue line is virtually impossible to see. So I've put a pencil line in so I can, and I've just put a mark on here which indicates where the back face of the bridge needs to go, or roughly where the back face of the bridge needs to go. It isn't set in stone. It can kind of move a little bit. And that is why this really isn't rocket science, and it isn't as complicated as some people might have you believe it is. Next up, I'm going to position my neck, and I've already ascertained that I want my neck body joint to be around about here, which is just a little bit before the 16th fret. So I will set my neck up there. I've got it resting on some masking tape just to keep it in position. And then I'm going to take my long rule and I'm going to measure from the nut line to the bridge saddle on the thinnest string. And in this case, that's the G string. And I'm measuring 34¼ there, which is 1/4 of an inch longer than our desired 34-inch scale length. So I'm just going to move that up, and if you look closely you might be able to see I've already marked it while I was getting this sorted out. So I'm just going to move that a few millimeters further towards the bridge, and that drops us right on that G saddle. And if you look at the bridge, I've got it set so that that G saddle is actually quite a long way forward. It's got a little bit of further forward movement, but realistically we don't need that. But I've got plenty of room to move the rest of the saddles backwards. Theory being, if you get this saddle exactly on your scale length, the rest of them will always have to be a little bit further back to ensure good intonation. So with all that done, we can now just put a mark there which will dictate the back face of our neck pocket, and we can get our template in position. And again, I've reinstated the centre line on this template, so we can get things nice and straight. And we can use that to roughly mark out the material we need to remove. And just for the sake of completeness, double check that for scale length. And we are still, to use a technical term, bob on. Okay, so next up is we need to ascertain how deep we need the neck pocket, get it to the drill press and start hogging out some of this material. And the neck pocket needs to be 5/8 of an inch deep in imperial, so in new money that's 16 millimeters. I'm just going to set my marking gauge up to 16 mil so I can run a line round. We can fire this over to the drill press and remove the bulk of that waste with a big Forstner bit. And with that hogged out, we'll just do the time-honoured super glue and masking tape. I'm not going to use any accelerator when I put this on, as I might otherwise do. I just want to give myself a little bit of open time on the glue so I can get this positioned absolutely spot on. if there's anything you don't want out of position, realistically, it's your neck pocket. That would not be great. And I'm going to use the big Triton router for this, primarily because it's just got that little bit more power, which will help me get this cut out properly, but also it's got a nice big base, which will kind of help keep things nice and stable as I work through this. Okay, and that is kind of pretty much where we need it. So I'm going to take off the template, and it's actually given us a really nice clean cut. Get the fuzzies off, and we'll give a little go. But to get this in properly, we actually have to sink this little adjuster wheel into the body a little bit as well. And I think what I need to do is kind of measure that, which is about 12.5 millimeters. Now I could route this out, but the problem I'd have is this is quite square in profile, and if I used a router, I'd have a very round profile. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it with a pencil and do some good old-fashioned chisel work to get this out. And mark that with my little marking knife. I'm going to stay a little bit inside the lines just to allow myself a bit of wriggle room. I'm going to mark down a nice deep knife line, and then just take some nice sharp chisels. Hopefully you can see there's a nice kind of, it's not tight, but it's uniform. You don't really want it tight because you want to be able to kind of freely adjust the truss rod. But I think that looks really, really nice. And I think I'm going to have to kind of relieve those edges just a little bit because they are too sharp to take finish, but we'll just round them off with a bit of sandpaper when the time comes. So all in all, I'm very, very happy with that. It's gone as well or better than I could have expected. And they always say the sign of a good neck joint is if you can pick it up without any kind of fastening or glue in there. And honestly, there's no fastenings or glue in there, and it's absolutely rock solid. Next up is we need to install the fixings that we're going to use on this neck. However, I'm using bolts and threaded inserts this time, and it's the first time I've done it. So I am going to leave this episode here. I'm going to go away, do a little bit of research, make sure I know exactly what I'm doing when I put these threaded inserts in, because we don't want to ruin the neck. And I'll be back with that in the next episode. So as always, don't forget to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.